Welcome,
March 29th.
everyone. Thank you for being here. We have public comment here at the beginning. Does not look like we have. Mr. Walsh, did you have any public comment you wanted to submit? Being public, sitting there. But I will move public comment to the end in case people come in who want to speak, if they can do so before our adjournment at 2 o'clock. Okay, so we're going to start out talking about the Roosevelt Makerspace. We have an original report that was called for by board resolution back in, what was that, August or something, right? That was the original evaluation of the auto shop facility, and it was, I think, our oversight that it wasn't formally delivered to the bond committee for consideration. I think that was the appropriate pathway, so Pam asked that come to the bond committee as a matter of important process, since we did call for that by board resolution. So, events have evolved since this point, where it was sort of determined from this report that the repurposing the old auto shop didn't seem to make sense physically or in terms of other constraints on the construction site. So, Jerry, is there anything you want to say about that process or about that site before we move into how conversation on the topic evolved after that?
Other than almost a week or two that I got hired, and we took a look at this, and was asked for an outside opinion being due. Is this true? Is this accurate? Analyze it. Tell me what parts look to be these are actual issues and what ones may not. And by and large, I agree with the report that the building wasn't worth saving. The other components of it is this will be a huge cost to the current contractor, yada, yada. It was under the assumption that if you roll this project out within that same timeline, yes, it would have been constraints in those other parts, because the report kind of had that part. But the section of it on whether the building was worth salvaging or not, it should be torn down. I can confirm that it needed to come down. The report's accurate in that regard.
Okay. Any further discussion on this report?
I'd just like a little bit more information about it. I haven't had a chance to read any of it, Jerry. Can you just kind of go through it briefly?
They did a comprehensive job going through structurally what would need to be strengthened and changed and either seismically upgraded. The electrical is almost a total gut to come back from the old, you think, shop and makerspace would be similar, but really not. The whole phasing and the type of power that was in it is not what's currently used these days. And nothing from the ducting standpoint worked. And we already have just ongoing roof failures in some areas, even using it for a construction trailer. Right now, they've got some leaks and other things in there. So across the board, tired infrastructure, things backed up. It's like a car replacement value versus new. When you start to spend as much money to try to bring it up to code as new. And then that's the other thing. It hits just about every code trigger on you've touched it to this extent now, so now you need to bring it up to new. So that's the quick version. There's a lot of detail that backs it up structurally, mechanically, electrically, civil, but that's where it arrives.
I think also, aside from the condition of the facility itself, the construction documents for Roosevelt anticipated that area would be open and available, and so there was plans for an access that infringed on that where the building is located now, and also the adjacent retention pond.
Sure. So there's kind of three things. It's the building itself, and I just covered that. It's in our design, we have other things going on in that area, and where are those going to go, and at what cost? So it addresses that.
Were there tennis courts
Yes. And not just the tennis courts, but off the side of the tennis courts is the detention retention basin for all the water that goes down in there. So that was a second component. And then the third was under the assumption that if we worked this into the existing contract, it was going to completely throw off their timing on everything else. So that's the one that was, I won't say the least relevant, but the other two were, so where would you put these things that were supposed to be where the tennis courts go? But mainly it overall addressed the building.
And we asked in the resolution, I'm sorry,
No, go for
we asked in the resolution that you give us an estimate of what we could get for $2 million, and it ended up being almost a $4 million project if we had done it. Is that right?
Well,
Or was
before
it more than
me,
that?
the resolution in August, I started in November, so the resolution would have been what could we have done in the building for $2 million
Right.
at 1.8 or whatever. Then the study says, I don't think we can get much out of that. It's going to cost more to replace it. So I think that's what the study was answering, the question of prior to my getting.
And how much was this study? What did this cost us?
It was either 53 or 56,000, 53 or 56,000. Seem to remember one of those two.
All right, any further discussion of that report, which again was our oversight, or my oversight, that this did not, was not formally brought to the bond committee when it was concluded. Okay, so moving on, we want to continue discussion of the viability of accommodating a makerspace elsewhere on the Roosevelt campus. And I would invite Chair Curler to talk about how the discussion on that issue evolved after the determination that it didn't make sense to try to repurpose the auto shop. And we have a resolution before us to look at whether we want to forward to the board approval for accommodating the makerspace in a different location on the Roosevelt campus.
Sure. I appointed a task force to help us delve into this. As you recall, the issue was relatively high profile and somewhat controversial, and so I just wanted to get input. I wanted to do it in a way that was thoughtful and calm and outside of the ruckus, essentially, to take a look at it. And it included both the principal and the vice principal of Roosevelt. It included some of our key staff, like Charlene Williams and Shay, and chaired by Eileen Brady and Charles McGee. So, and subsequently, and I also want to recognize you, Amy, because pretty much on your first day of the job, you went over and we went over together with your invitation to talk to Vigor and said, you know, there's a potential opportunity. Do you want to participate? And so spoke with local industry, and it was clear that they were motivated. They were brought into the task force as well. And the idea was to see if we could do something that was additive, that did not disturb the existing design whatsoever, and we almost walked away from the project because of that direction. Paul was also part of that task force. And at the end of the day, found a way that to make it work, found a program that made sense to all involved, including staff, which is to have a 10,000 square foot space. At the bottom, 5,000 feet would be 2 new CTE programs, one manufacturing, the other aviation and
Transportation.
transportation, and working with local industry on both those new strands. Top would be a more modern maker, multidisciplinary maker space that would serve the students and their projects as well as professional staff development, as well as potentially also being used as a location for 7th grade makerspace camp projects that we are going to institute. We've instituted this year. And so I think that's. And then the final would be is it would be envisioned that that it would be in the evenings where the CTE classes are taking their place during the day. In the evenings, it would be job training for the community, and again, both responsive to the needs of both the community and the local businesses of the area. So I think that's it in a nutshell. And then bringing it back to the bond committee now, and the other day you guys had another discussion.
And we did have a discussion on the makerspace proposal with the Teaching and Learning Committee in January. So the handout that you have here is the description of exactly what Tom just outlined in terms of what the curriculum would be. It's not fully fleshed out, but it's fairly well fleshed out, what the engagement of partners might be, how the curriculum and the use of space ties into our overall CT strategy and the strands that we have identified as being most desirable or necessary for our students, and how they link into our local labor needs. So that's, we had a pretty good discussion about that with the Teaching and Learning Committee. Before us now, we have a resolution which seeks to adopt in concept this makerspace proposal, which is a modification to the construction plans for Roosevelt High School, as well as a modification to the educational specifications. I would just add to Tom's sort of preamble that this grew out of a lot of agitation from the community that we were not adequately addressing the importance of CTE at Roosevelt, and that we really wanted to accelerate opportunities for our students all over our district in terms of CTE, and Roosevelt students in particular, given what we know to be the strong correlation between having access to that type of programming and graduating from high school and finding a productive career path. So I guess I'd just open it up for discussion generally before we specifically move this resolution. Paul and Pam?
So, first of all, let me say I don't think there's a bigger proponent for career technical education on the board than I have been for the last 6 years. I think it's really important. I am concerned about this, and you all know I'm concerned about it. The one thing that you haven't touched on at all right now is the money and where it would come from. So before I ask any other questions, I'd like to hear more about the funding for the project.
We have a resolution in front of us, and I would like to amend this resolution. I would like to propose
Can I get
amendment.
an answer to my question before you move there?
Yeah, I'm seeking to answer your question, Pam.
Okay.
So I would like to amend the resolution that we have in front of us by striking the A and B under number 2, which discusses where the funds would come from, and my proposed amendment would be to eliminate any reference to using contingency from the Roosevelt project or from the bond program for this, and instead identify only our bond premium as a source of support for for this Makerspace project. We have an estimate from our Office of School Modernization of up to $5 million for this proposed project. We do believe that we can attract significant outside investment from external partners. And in looking at our bond premium, what that refers to is that we have already put 2 tranches of bonds to the market in a very favorable climate that has resulted in, and Yusef, correct me if my numbers aren't quite right, but has resulted in approximately $47 million more than was anticipated for the overall bond program. We have already absorbed roughly $45 million of that into our existing bond program, so some of this has been used to increase the scope at Roosevelt and Franklin. Some of this has been used to pad our contingencies because at the same time that we've had this value to our bond premium, we've also seen some escalation, so it was prudent to pad contingencies with this. We have just over $2 million remaining now, and we have another tranche of bonds that we expect to put to market this spring with a conservative estimated guess of reaping at least a $3 million premium. So I would look to Yusef to confirm or elaborate on what I have just described, and I would like to modify the resolution to propose only using bond premium to fund this project.
And the numbers you provided are fairly accurate. To be exact, we have about $2.2 million roughly available in premiums. We are expecting a minimum $3 million. This is very conservative estimate of the remaining $65 million that we will issue. I've not put the exact date on the issue of the 65 yet. And quite honestly, it doesn't matter the date because we have the cash. But we want to make sure we meet our charge before we decide to make that decision. So we'll be working with our financial counsel in terms of the exact date. But yeah, so we should have the $5 million premiums between what we have currently and the next issuance in available resources for the bond projects.
So, question?
Yeah.
Still the same question. So, Amy said we had $45 million in bond premium on the last project. Is that correct?
We have issued 2 issuances. The first one, we got about 13.9 roughly in premium. The second issuance we issued last April, we got 33.2 million in premium. So that's about 47.1. We already spent or allocated 44.9 to various projects. That leaves us with 2.2 unallocated in premium.
And we think we're going to get, conservatively, 3 out of this one?
Yeah, at least the 65 million.
And do we anticipate we will need to absorb that into any of our projects if we took 43 last time? 43 million absorbed into our projects, and this is going to be a $3 million.
Well, just the reason that we absorbed it before was because we had it, not because the project needed it.
So
And they will end up needing it. We will have a multitude of uses for it, including a lot of summer improvement projects that we want to do. But the fact remains that it was $47 million more than was anticipated when we laid out the scope of the bond program.
And it was almost all absorbed into our bond projects,
correct.
except for that 2.2 million. Well, now we're going to get 3 million, and we're saying that is not going to be absorbed at all into our project. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that we've already had a $45 million premium, which has enabled us to pad our contingencies as well as complete more summer improvement projects than we originally committed to the voters.
So how much
So it's
contingency do we have left now out of that 45 million plus whatever we have in our original contingency?
So the 45 bond premium is 2.2 left. And it's not allocated, but it certainly could be encumbered. We have 36 million of unfunded we didn't even get to, but it's not allocated. We didn't already identify it for something. So 2.2 is left of the 47 million, of the 45. Program contingency was set up for 20 million originally, and it's been called a variety of things. Program contingency, board contingency, and that's at 10. So
Just
the
half of
bond,
that.
yeah, so the bond premium, I'm told, is all done prior, plus half of that went to the adjusting the construction design for ed specs and additional criteria. So that's where a lot of that went to. And then we have a department contingency that's at $9 million, $8.7 million right now. But that rolls out over time, and $4 to $5 million of that will roll with Grant in 3 more months as Grant gets prepared to sign a GMP or preparation for that with a contractor. So at least half of that department contingency is encumbered and allotted, and then the other half is certainly encumbered when you look at it that way. So so that's the contingencies that are out there. And then each project has their own that they're drawing down against as work progresses, contingency goes down.
So what's the percentage of our projects that we're through right now?
Well, Roosevelt is 35%, so Franklin's probably about 32, 31%. And of course, Fabian is 12. I mean, just getting on the ground, maybe 13, 12,
Grant
somewhere
is-
around there. Grant is in design, so yeah.
So what percentage of our contingencies did we use for having 2 of our projects 40% completed?
Or 2.
Not including the change in scope.
Oh,
Why would
In
it
other words-
include the
in
change
other words,
scope?
if
We're
I
trying
added-
to change the scope right now. Of course it includes the change in scope.
Well, the change in scope was a determination specifically to use the bond premium to go above half
And
the
that's
project
exactly
was
what you're
prescribed.
asking for
The
now.
board contingency, right?
It
So
was
the
the
change
board
in scope was 50% of the board contingency. The additional criteria was 50% of the board contingency.
yeah, if you're asking me now, if we added up Roosevelt and Franklin
Right.
on percent and then contingency, what part's been burned, I can't put my finger on that right now. I can get that information. I did Roosevelt's because I got that one done just before we all walked in here because I figured that was the main one we were going to want to talk about. So I know that, but I can get that information. I just don't have it right
So what's that one, Jerry?
So Roosevelt is 35%. Is 35% complete. There was, and we are 54% through project contingency right now. And so what's interesting is there's 3 phases to Roosevelt. The first phase is 55% of the overall project. The second is 35. It's going to present the most unforeseen because we're getting into all the permanent buildings. We're only in 1 right now. And the last is the site work, and that's about 10%. So, yeah, so the Roosevelt contingency, I'm hearing the recommendation for bond premium certainly would be better than the Roosevelt contingency because that's
So,
30,
and also our,
35 in, that 35 in, and 54 expended.
Right. And when we were at Franklin, when we were doing the interior work in Franklin, what was the increase, or what were the surprises that ate into that contingency, or how much of it so far?
Yeah, well, I would need folks before me to speak to some of it, but I can just tell you that what I've heard in the 4 months I've been here is we had some site issues. We had a soils report that didn't match what was under the ground, and so we ran into a lot of rock, had to move the whole detention basin and everything, which was sizable. But a lot of it is just a lot of the unforeseen asbestos that's in the building, and so that's a large part of it.
but from our 3 project contingency sources that we have now, does our overall contingency fall within the professional recommendations in terms of percentage of contract that you're familiar with?
They started within the range that they should have been, yeah. But we're concerned with the burn rate of Franklin and what might happen with Grant and Roosevelt. So that's where the bond contingency is important. You know, I mean, we're not declaring it yet,
I mean,
obviously.
the
But
sec-
We're not touching it.
yeah,
Right,
you're right. So
right.
that's what we're talking about plots.
And
right?
that was a
So-
very valuable recommendation. from
Yeah, that's
EAC.
important. I mean, you know, we're not going to do this yet, but there's the chance that each one of those with more unforeseens could roll to a couple million each, and we'll be asking the board for the next year or so as we find out.
So you're saying maybe a possibility of exceeding project contingency, but we have 2 other contingency
Yes, we will,
Pots,
because of the size
should
of
that
these
be the
sites
case?
and the amount and the age and the amount of unknown we're running into, we will be on time, on budget with the program, but we're going to exceed our project contingency on all three of those. Is my
So that was a very prudent measure on our part to keep 3 sources of contingency funds overall for the bond, including one which is, available for other improvement projects.
If you have to look at your pots, the individual project contingencies are going fast. The board 10% is going to have to be the back funding of those, and then so now you're talking about bond premium if you're looking at the sources.
So, I know you've only been here a short period of time, Jerry, but in your opinion, as a professional who's been doing this for a long time, would you start using our contingency for add-on projects, like we were trying to do at Roosevelt?
I think this.
No, I don't think we should recommend using contingency. I think that if we want to move this forward, we should
Bond
only look.
premium becomes the contingency when you run out of contingency.
It's additional
That's what it is.
contingency. It's additional
That's right.
contingency. I think if we feel like the bond program was entitled to 10% more than was ever anticipated or scoped, and that would be necessary to complete our intended projects, then we've got some bigger issues that we need to look at.
The way we've been going through what we have, I am very surprised that the board is even considering starting to spend money on something that we haven't already got, when we already have $36 million worth of unfunded projects that we want to do, and we're only 30 to 40% complete on our projects, and we've burned through more than 50% of our contingencies. This is really fiscal irresponsibility, in my opinion.
Of the 36 million in projects that we would hope to get to with any leftover project contingency, that's also in the context of having completed more than the number of improvement projects that we committed to the voters, even though we all know that we have, decades of deferred maintenance and neglected facilities investment that we need and want to get to.
Yeah, I guess, from my position, because it is important to be recognizing, Kevin, your group has been very clear on this in terms of fiscal responsibility and the agency and the escalations. But then you have to put it in perspective as well. So taking something that's just a little over 1/2 of 1%. At this stage of money that we weren't even anticipating was going to be here, does not, under my judgment, fall under fiscal responsibility, and particularly given the benefits and the holistic nature of what we do.
Yusef, especially since we have 5 board members here. And I know often people don't understand where the bond premium comes from. It appears to be just magical money that's fallen from the sky. Could you give us a very brief explanation of where the bond premium, how the bond premium comes to be?
It's really the work of the interest rate. The interest rate is so low, the market is so competitive, people are willing to pay more to borrow the bond than go invest somewhere else, or borrow other bonds from corporations, because government is just much more secure. And that's really what the premium is.
Mm-hmm.
So the market has been competitive, even though the Fed increased the interest rate by a quarter, 25 basis. We saw an upstick in the interest rate for a short period of time, but long term seems not to affect it, so the interest rate now is back down.
Mm-hmm.
My view and in conversation with others who are in the market, we're not anticipating the interest rate is going to go up significantly in the next year. So I think we're safe.
Mm-hmm.
Projecting the $3 million based on the previous 2 issuances, we're getting a premium more than 10%.
Oh, yes, yes.
So, so 3 million is very conservative. I think I'm confident with estimating a figure.
As we should be.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Have another question? Yeah. So Jerry, how much is a roof on an elementary school?
Brand new, seismic,
We put a
everything
roof
else.
on, right?
A couple million, depending on the size.
So we could have about 2.5 roofs here maybe for our elementary schools.
Maybe 3, depending on what we're doing. What else we're realigning at
So
the time.
it's a lot of money. It's not 1% or whatever. It's a lot of money. It's $5 million. Plus another couple million for fixtures, furnishings, and equipment for the space once we have it. Correct? Isn't that the
We don't know
the
that it's
estimate?
$5 million. That is the upper estimate.
That's the estimate.
And we also know that we'll have some outside investment.
We know that because we have a signed letter or a pledge? Or?
No, we have a commitment and I have a indication that I'm confident about. There's a lot of excitement from our manufacturing partners about finally having an opportunity to build really significant job training program and partner with this district, and there's been a hunger for it for a long time.
Well, my recollection is we started this in August, and we still don't have any signed commitment from any employer.
We have not asked for a
So
signature.
we have to sign our own commitment.
Yeah, right.
So once we sign our own
Right.
commitment, we'll go get the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
have to have a project.
As
before
you
we
have
can
said
take
in many
donation.
places where you're trying to raise money, Tom, it doesn't work out that way. And I've been a professional money raiser, and I know that it doesn't work out that way.
Well, first things first.
Yeah. The first thing would be to get your commitments from people before you commit your own public dollars for this project.
Okay, I concur with Tom that we are in no position to seek a formal commitment from any of our very enthusiastic industry partners until we tell them that we actually have a project, at which point I will very happily renew conversations with our manufacturing partners about this. And it's, we're talking about their financial participation, their participation of sharing and developing curriculum for this space based on other programs that they've been involved with community colleges and other school districts, and we're talking about fixtures and equipment for the programming itself. But, I agree, that's speculative at this point, so I think it is prudent for us to move forward, assuming that that could possibly be nothing, and then once it does come in, it lowers our investment in the project.
Another question. I'd like to hear from Kevin Spellman.
Yeah, me too.
Accountability Committee.
Thank you. Committee. I'm here to represent the BAC, Bond Accountability Committee, which was assigned a role, the role I'm filling today, in the 2012 bond measure. And our charter gives us a couple of tasks. It asks us to provide oversight and monitor performance of the bond program. And that means is the money being spent efficiently and as promised? Is the work on schedule, et cetera, and also provide advice to the board. So before I give that advice, I'd like to tell you why I think our advice matters. The PPS 2012 capital program is a substantial program by any measure. But the BAC has on its roster some folks who, this is not small potatoes, but it's Willie Paul, for instance, at Kaiser, matches this program every 2 years, for instance. Tom Peterson at the port, a couple of his projects equal the size of this. So these are people who understand a capital program, and that's really what our focus is going to be on. It's not on this $5 million. It's on this program. The single most important best practices that that we want to underline in terms of capital program are discipline and caution. As I said, this is not simply a $5 million question. It's a question of, are we going to be disciplined within the program, and to the extent that we think there may be some additional money, are we going to be cautious in its spending? The project may be desirable. It may be more than desirable. We're not going to argue its merits. We're certainly not going to argue against it on an educational basis of any kind. We're not educators. We are here to talk about the capital program. In that context, we've simply concluded it does not belong in the 2012 bond program for multiple reasons. We didn't reach that conclusion easily. In the 3 years to date, I think the BAC has been deferential to the board as the scope of projects have evolved, and for instance, this change in the size, the high schools, additional criteria, etc. But that's where they, 1, made sense, 2, could be funded, and 3, were consistent with the promises made to the voters. So in that spirit, I've really searched hard to find some kind of foundational underpinning as to why this project should be in the bond. I can't find it in the bond measure language. It's silent on CTE. It talks about leaking roofs. It talks about seismic upgrades. It talks about science rooms in middle schools. So I went back to the long-range facilities plan, which was really the basis of the whole 30-year program. It uses the term career technical education twice, page 37 and page 58 of a 62-page document. I can't really jump in and grab those and say, therefore, we should satisfy this need out of this bond program. This project, in our judgment, is not integral to Roosevelt High School modernization. The current design that's under construction already meets or exceeds the ed spec that was approved by the board. It's not in the approved master plan that was passed in December 2013. It was not considered at over 100 community and stakeholder meetings at Roosevelt. It was not presented to the BAC. Of course, not every detail has been presented to the BAC, but we've been free to attend master plan committee meetings, DAG committee meetings, not so here. It's not in the approved schematic design that was approved by the board in June 2014. It's not consistent with the ability to expand the capacity of Roosevelt High School. It's using the space for 350 students that would fill a high school where we have spent, I don't know the number, Jerry, is before your time, but we spent a lot of money upgrading Roosevelt from 1,350 students to 1,700 students. And we're taking away where those classrooms are going to go. It's not consistent in our judgment with the principle of equity between high schools. It's not consistent with the concept of programmatic view of the bond measure. Has there been a discussion? Why, if this is such a good idea, should it be at Roosevelt at all? Maybe it should be at Benson. Has that discussion happened? I don't think so. Most of all, it's not in the budget. It's not in Roosevelt High School budget. We cannot say it's integral to that project. Talked about project contingencies. At the BAC last 2 reports, we've highlighted the fact that we're very concerned about contingencies. The latest, what I've just heard, is news to me because we haven't met in a little while. But those contingencies are shrinking fast. and I think faster than we feared even. We have unfunded work to do. The specific project contingency at Roosevelt, frankly, from what I now hear, I see no way that that's going to be sufficient. Why do we need, on a program basis, discipline and caution? We're 3 years into an 8-year program. The February report, we talked about that only 30% of the bond proceeds have been spent. 70% is still at risk. That's actually not a good number, because remember, 45 million off the top went to pay down debt of Rosa Parks. So that was never at risk. That number really is 23% has been spent. 77% to go at risk. $45 million escalation contingency is long gone. It's been allocated to projects. Talk about the bond premium. We had 47 million. Had we not had that, this program would be in serious trouble. We have 2 million left. 45 million's gone. If we get another 3 million, hallelujah. I can tell you we're going to need it.
Where'd the 45 go?
Well, they went to multiple places, Tom, and I don't have the full list, but it went partly to escalation, partly to the additional criteria.
So for future escalation, it's been allocated for future escalation.
Some of that future escalation is now past escalation because it's on Roosevelt and Franklin. Yes. We have $110 million.
Just to be clear, that was $45 million that we were not anticipating that has been put together, allocated for
Correct.
Use and future use based upon increased costs.
Correct.
Over 10% of our total
Not
budget
just
is
increased
not-
cost, it's increased scope as well. Yes.
And increased scope beyond the 10 million that the
Yes.
program contingency.
Yes. Yes. We have a $110 million high school. We haven't even started yet. It's not even designed. We have, I'm hearing different numbers on promised IP work that has yet to be bid out. The last report I saw, and we're due for an update, that's why my numbers are a little out of date, but the last report I saw, IP16 was negative.
What is that?
It had a negative contingency because the staff is waiting for the bids to determine how much we have to take from program contingency to support that program.
And that's a bundle of projects.
Yes.
Within 16, it's more than one.
Yes. Yes. And in the meantime, this is the hottest construction market we've seen since, I don't know, 2006, probably. Bid results are unpredictable. Well, they're predictable in one sense. They're higher than we expected. But we don't know how much higher. And another issue that really concerns me, and I don't think we're really focused enough on it, every one of our projects is time critical. High school's IP, so we've been very fortunate to date, and it's a tribute to the staff, that we have not had to reach into contingency to get the IP work finished in time. I can't say that anyone can guarantee that's going to be the case going forward. Franklin's behind schedule. We still have float, but it's behind schedule. Roosevelt has been on the cusp from the beginning. Imagine what will happen if we don't open phase 1 of Roosevelt this summer. We may have to spend money to open it. In conclusion, our current contingencies and reserves, and in our judgment, any future bond premium at this point should be reserved and guarded against scope creep. On a broader question, we believe, this committee can't just say, okay, this is a $5 million project, let's move on. One, I already talked about the classrooms, the future classrooms. Where are they going to go? You have to address that.
Not a net loss, because these are classrooms as well.
Understood. Does not provide 350 students. More important, well, not more importantly, at least equally importantly, what are the rules going forward? If we approve this, what are the criteria going forward? You have to tell us, because we can't come to you and tell you you're breaking the rules if we don't know what the rules are. What we do know is, if you approve this, the budget isn't the rule, because this is a budget buster. The vetting and approval by the community is not the rule, because that hasn't happened. The master plan and designs approved by the board is not binding. Doesn't mean anything. The bond measure is not a source document. Long-range facilities plan is not a source document. What is to stop us saying we want a third gymnasium at Franklin? You have to tell us what the rules are, and if you can't, I'd be particularly, this is not a BAC concern, I personally would be concerned about a 2016 bond. What are the rules for that bond? Summary, Roosevelt's been designed and is being built to meet ed specs. It's consistent with the other high schools. Designs were approved and the budgets funded accordingly. There are no funds available from the project contingency. There are no funds that should be applied from the program contingency, and in my judgment, any future bond premium should be reserved for contingency. Building's not an integral part of the Roosevelt modernization. Hasn't been subjected to public scrutiny either in the Roosevelt district or in the district as a whole. The BAC cannot find how this project fits within the spirit of the 2012 bond vote when over 70% of that money is still at risk. Those are my
Thank you very
comments.
much. Did you want to comment on the public process originally that you were involved with?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Will we ask questions?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The criteria that you didn't want to speak to, the educational merits, I think are absolutely overwhelming. I think that the children in North Portland very much need this kind of education. I think they need this kind of experience, and I think they need it at Roosevelt. I do have to disagree with you, at least in terms of programming, in saying that this was not vetted by the community. I was present at the community outreach meetings that the DAG did. Overwhelmingly, what the community identified as its top priority were all of the functions of STEM, everything, and of hands-on learning, everything that we are going to provide in this makerspace. The community was very consistent in that. And the community has continued to be very persistent in saying that that's what they know works. That's what they know what works for their children. And that's what they want to see at Roosevelt. I would also just mention I am very concerned about the size of Roosevelt I am afraid that it is going to, even if we add this, it may very well be offering inequitable programming because the size, as it is now, determines the programming. And so I am very sensitive to the issue you raise of where we can add the additional 350 students worth of classrooms. But this location on the north end, certainly that the public saw, was only the third, and it seemed kind of haphazardly added location. The two that were very strongly floated by both the architect and by staff were on the opposite sides of the building. The southeast and southwest corners. And I think that we can get, certainly for the southeast corner, we can get far more than adequate space there. So I do not believe that we would be closing off any roads for Roosevelt in the future. And Mike.
Well, I wanted to see, do you have any other I wanted to respond to one thing Kevin said, and I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate your stewardship role that you play and the expertise that you bring to it and the judgment that you bring to it. And discipline and caution should be the name of your game. I would like to feel that discipline and caution is something that's very important to me too, but so is opportunity, and so is educational equity. And I think with regard to your question about what are the rules of the game now if we proceed with this, and I would say that if we move this project forward, it is not in opposition to any of those standards that the BAC has been asked to adhere to. It is additive to each of those. And with regard to the budget, I found your original argument about the use of any contingency funds for this project to be very compelling and in fact irrefutable, given the climate and given what your role is and the role you've played. I don't feel the same way about unanticipated bond premium, and I think that if we're going to, I think that it's poignant that you raise the point that the long-range facilities plan and the bond language did not specifically call out CTE education, and that the long-range facilities plan mentions it twice in a 60-page document. They didn't specifically say that this is not a priority of ours, but it wasn't addressed as what we know it to be, which is a real game changer in terms of getting our kids to graduation and connecting them to productive career paths. And quite frankly, we are not doing a very good job of that. And we need to create new opportunities, and we need to, I think, take some bold steps to really make progress in that way. And if we can create an opportunity where we do it in partnership with industry and in partnership with developing the labor force that we know is needed today in our own community, then I think that's a significant game changer in terms of really building opportunities for kids. So.
Well, I'm going to be the last person to argue against CTE and its effectiveness. Again, my concern is the 2012 bond. If this project is everything you said it is, and I have no reason to believe it isn't, if we're going to be consistent with the commitment to transparency, if we're going to be consistent to doing what we told the voters we were going to do, then this belongs in a 2016 bond vote. Allow the public to have their say. Personally, I think it might help them bond vote. But I don't know. But we satisfy transparency, we satisfy budgetary integrity. It gives us time to amend, if necessary, the master plan for Roosevelt and figure out where those classrooms would go.
Well,
But
they're
this,
not
but this
figured
bond,
out- they're
this
not
bond
figured
vote,
out now
But-
in the current.
sure they are. They're in the master plan. Sure they are. They're exactly where this building is intended to go. I mean, we're not talking a 2024 bond vote here. We're talking 2016. It's not that far away. We can satisfy all the needs you've expressed without violating the 2012 bond.
And I want to be perfectly clear, I do not think this is in any way a violation of the 2012, but it's an unanticipated use that was not specifically called out. It's not contrary to anything that was put forth to the voters. It's added in.
I would disagree. I don't think it's unanticipated. I think it's intentional. It's intentional. There's nothing unanticipated about this. Tom wants it, and so,
I think
We're
the
gonna move
$45
forward
million
with it.
bond premium was unanticipated.
well, but it was. That was unanticipated. This space is not unanticipated.
Well, and that's actually correct. And so to your point, like, and we've talked a lot about this, so
Yep.
not a lot of surprises here, and also total appreciation for not only your role but how you execute it. So thank you for doing what you do. And your two main words are discipline and caution. And I absolutely agree with that. And there are times when there are some exceptions. And in this case, I believe this is an exception because of the voters. This issue has been talked about. There was basically an unsettled matter, and there was an election for school board that happened. And after that election, the timing was such that the issue could get revisited. And that's what's happening. And when you talk about the voters put in new board members who want to see this happen. And it's consistent with the Roosevelt project. It's a 2012 project because it's going to build in 2000. It's going to build the Roosevelt High School. It's part of the new redesign. And so, with that being said, I guess I respectfully disagree with it. It's not that you can't find a connection because in terms of bond, we said we were going to redesign and rebuild these high schools. This is part of that. A little disjointed because of the politics of the two different boards. And it's not standard operating procedure. I'll grant you that, and going forward, I absolutely agree with you. But there are times when you make exemptions, and I think, from my personal standpoint, this is one based on A, the politics, and B, the opportunity.
I would just say that I can't even believe you just said that, Tom, because that goes exactly to what we talk about when we talk about transparency. And I don't know how you can say what you think the voters voted for, that they voted as new board members in because of this project, because this happened after the election. And not only that, there was an opportunity to ask the community about this. And instead of doing that, you appointed a task force of 6 or 7 people, chaired by people who don't even live in the community, to go ahead and make a decision about this, and then bring it fait accompli to the board. And, I'm surprised. I'm not going to go any further than that. I'm disappointed in the fact that this was done behind closed doors. I'm disappointed in the fact that the board members have pretty much made up their mind about this based on your conversations. I'm disappointed that there's no input from the Roosevelt DAG. Like we said, 60 to 100 meetings with the DAG, and this is the plan they came up with, the current design. Now, granted, there are people in the community who want a makerspace there. I'd love to have a makerspace there, but I'm not willing to put in jeopardy this bond in order to do it. And I think it's putting in jeopardy not only this bond, but our opportunity to pass a bond in 2016 as well. So the other thing I wanted to ask about was the equity question, because Paul raised that, and I always think that's an important issue. And it's my recollection, Jerry, I'm turning to you for this, that we have about 10,000 square feet of CTE space in each one of the high schools. Is that about right? 10 to 11 to 12?
Yeah, I don't think it, I think that might be the overall total, if you kind of, right. It's in that range.
Right. And I just want to, for the record, want to make the point that at both Franklin and, or at Franklin, we have, 1,600 students? And at Roosevelt, we have maybe 900. And so you have two-thirds number of students at Roosevelt who are using the same amount of space. I don't see an equity issue with that. I see more space per student for CTE than I see at Franklin, and probably at Grant as well when we get to it. So it may not be the CTE space that a small percentage of the community wanted and has been very vocal about it, but there is equitable space for CTE at Roosevelt. And it's my recollection, I'm sorry Charlene couldn't be here to talk to us, the principal, because it's my recollection that at the time there was a lot of discussion about what CTE strands were going to be included in that. And the reason that the CTE space is designed the way that it is because of the CTE strands that were selected by the community, not by a small group of people.
Do you want to respond, Paul? I want to make sure that we finish our discussion as a committee and then we can open it up a little bit to others.
Speaking for myself, I disagree very strongly. I would, again, for myself, I'd even go Tom one better. I think that what this is doing is not taking advantage of an opportunity. I really feel that what this is doing is correcting a very flawed, very deficient design that was not created by the DAG, but that was imposed on the DAG in very great part. And when you look at the actual numbers for the hands-on spaces, they're going to be at Franklin. I think it's more like 17,000 than 10. And a great deal of the space at Roosevelt is not really going to be usable. Half of the space by the theater is a driveway for getting trucks onto the stage. And much of the rest...
A driveway is being counted as CTE space?
Oh, yes. Yes.
A driveway?
Well, yes.
Outside?
No, it's passageway through the building. You can't have anything, you can't hold anything flooring. And much of the rest of that space is going to be used for storage, for sets. It's going to leave very little hands-on space at all. And I think that if you look at the graduation rates for Franklin and the graduation rates for Roosevelt, investing more in hands-on learning at Roosevelt is a very equitable position to take because Roosevelt needs it and Roosevelt's kids need it.
Well, we'll be lucky to get Roosevelt built.
All right, do we want to open it up? Mike, I know you had something you wanted to say.
So just a couple of things. I don't know, and this is a request for you, Amy. Some of us were sitting for 15 minutes in the wrong room, and so I think we missed, did we miss the public comment?
No, nobody was here, so I said we'd move it to the end of the.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to actually say just a couple things quickly. One is I too strongly disagree with Pam's assessment of this. I think we have had a public process. I mean, Paul, I just want to say I completely agree with the way you characterized. We had a flawed process, and this is an opportunity to correct it, and I'm very pleased to have that opportunity. I also want to say that I appreciate the work of Amy and Paul and Tom in making this a very, very feasible proposition in timing and funding. And then the last thing I want to say is this was an issue throughout my campaign. The issue throughout my campaign was the concern of the public that the public is investing so much in the rebuild of our schools, and they've had so little opportunity in the Roosevelt community to get value out of their investment through the flawed DAG process. And the other, and I made a commitment to the community that as soon as I was elected, if that occurred, that we would address that. Another commitment I made to the community that I think we have already corrected was lifting the cap at Benson. So to me, this is how democracy works. The board has the opportunity to make new decisions. A new board was elected in large part because the community wanted change. And I think when the community sees that we're correcting past mistakes at Roosevelt, they're more likely to invest further in a future bond. I will say that's subject to everyone's opinion and their discussions within the community, but that's what drives me on this debate. That's what motivates me. And I would just, one last thing, to suggest that any of the discussions that this board has had with the task force and with professionals in the community and anyone else lacks transparency and is behind closed doors is just wrong. And it suggests to the community that making a responsible decision with participation of the community is being done in an underhanded way. And since I'm part of that process, I just want to be really clear, Pam, that I resent the way you keep presenting this.
It's the way it happened, Mike.
Do we have any?
Small personal task force, closed meetings, no public. That's the way it happened. So that's not transparency in my book, and if it's transparency in yours, then that's fine.
It is. So thank you.
Great.
Do we have any other public comment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now if I can read my notes, which often is something that doesn't happen. First of all, some of the comments that were just made, I'm trying not to keep it personal, but I've been involved in the school board politics since the 60s in the desegregation. Oh,
Can you state your name, please?
yes, it's Mike Verbout. Anything else? Social Security number. And participated in recent times in all kinds of home visits where board members came and the superintendent came and focus groups and on and on and on. And Pam knows as well as anybody that the consistent theme was trust, transparency. Many people associate, and that's why elections have consequences. People did not associate. I mean, if anybody wanted to go out and characterize former boards about closed meetings and micromanaging and all the accusations that have been shared just recently, it abounds. And y'all know that because you've got those reports and you heard those conversations. You heard people come year after year after year, and there was a stalwart thing that no, it's what we've decided. The members of the new board reflect, I think, the reason they were elected. is they're willing to listen to community. I'm going to let other people respond to the facts about the process, but there was plenty of community involvement in process. But I really think it's unfair to accuse board members of closed room deals, no transparency, Pam, because you've lived through several years of how former boards operated, and the public are not foolish, okay? So we have the history as well. I think to characterize it like that is professionally disingenuous at best. People have, times change, and thank goodness for people who are willing to listen to taxpayers who very often are not listened to unless they have a position of influence. With Kevin, who I respect and work with, I'm wondering what promises we did make to the voters. What did we actually promise them? Did we promise them that we would be on time and on budget? Did we promise them that we would be good bean counters and account for all of the bricks and mortar? Well, when those of us who were on the long-range planning committee, and it morphed into a smaller group, and it became Our Portland, Our Schools, and it became CPPS, our goal was to be of service in helping to bring about change in teaching and learning in Portland Public Schools. Now the board, the other board, had sponsored a bond, which failed miserably. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out why it failed. When we began our work in OPUS and CPPS, our goal, universally and globally for PPS, not just pitting one group against another or one community against another or members. No, that was not it. The goal remains to be committed to all communities and students in PPS. But what we found is that we couldn't bring about that teaching and learning because the buildings were so bad. It wouldn't allow that. So then we entered in aggressively to getting the bond passed. And the bond passed very successfully. And I think the promises we made to the voters was not just bricks and mortar. It was that we were going to offer 21st century buildings that would allow for 21st century teaching and learning. Now we're still all wrestling with what a 21st century learning experience is, but we're getting better handles on it all the time. If we're going to talk about equity, and we're going to talk about issues like trust and transparency, and we're going to talk about responsiveness to voters and so on, if you're looking at a 21st century building and then programmatic elements that reflect that, you have to think about things like how extensive is going to be the programmatic areas, particularly, it does take a rocket scientist to find out if you're concerned about graduation rates, if you're concerned about youngsters being able to come from lower socioeconomic areas and diversified and enriched cultures. We want everybody to go to college and university. It's a great goal. But we also know a lot of people aren't going to go, and they need trades, and they need careers. And a lot of the trades and careers that have been identified are very good paying jobs. We deal with a lot of students who would love to remain in school but feel a moral obligation to their families to go out and get a job and help buy groceries and pay utilities and not be able to participate in athletics and drama. All of those folks would like to participate. I'll cut it short because there's reams of stuff here. But pardon me?
I appreciate what you're saying, but yeah, I want to
Thank you. Yeah, I understand. And so I will save the other reams of informative information for another opportunity. I'm sure that we'll have that opportunity. But I want to say thank you to the new members of the board for being responsive to the community and in such a short time. And I believe that if you're looking for a success in a new bond, a lot of it will come by what you're doing current times with those things that are happening now. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any other? Go ahead.
A lot of what I was going to say is already brought up by Paul. I'm Joe Perky. Just going to follow Mike's lead. My name is Joe Perky. A lot of what I was going to say was already covered by Paul and Mike. But about what rules to follow in the future, it really was that the rules were broken by the previous board and the previous Office of School Modernization leadership. Now we have the chance to go back and follow that actual process that was put in place and do what the community and the DAG was asking for all along. So I really appreciate that listening that's happening now. Being part of the task force, there was a pretty strong mandate put on ourselves and put on us by Tom to deal with a lot of the concerns that were brought up by the community for the more space, by staff in the district central office against the space, extra space at the time, and those concerns were vetted throughout the task force process, equity being at the forefront of them, but making sure that we identified all the potential costs from the bricks and mortar to the equipment to the staffing and programming and professional development, making sure that we are serving students that have a future in a four-year degree type career, trade school career, on-the-job training. All of these things are met in this space with equity. All students can bring what they have to the table in this type of space. And then they can all go out into a multitude of different career paths from this space. So it's a real leveling playing field, the way that I see STEM. And I really appreciate the STEM programming being pushed by the district at this time. And because it is, I think this is a perfect time to put money to invest in this type of a space. Roosevelt can be at the forefront of this rolling out across the district, especially with all the rest of the schools being built out after this. This is exactly the time to do it so that we have something to model the rest of the designs after. So it's a change to the approved schematic design, but it's a change to correct that schematic design. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Do you have anybody else who wants to come on forward? I do want to try to adjourn roughly on time, and we have a quick update from Ken Fisher, I think. So.
I do have some factual
Great.
things to say. My name is Donna Cohen. I was a technology ed teacher, and I have a master's in what would be called now CTE administration. I want to thank the new members of the board for being open-minded and for being concerned about this situation. It's interesting. I know that sometimes I come across as rather emotional, and I do feel emotional about this. But you need to know that everything that the community advocates have discussed, have fought for, is evidence-based. It is based on data. It is based on research. It is based on, in my case, personal experience as the only one that I've met at PPS to this point, except for the tech ed teachers at Franklin, who has any experience working in a STEM type of facility. This was a report I did, 55 pages, comparing the process, the planning process for Franklin and Roosevelt. It is evidence-based. It uses PPS documents. If anybody has any question about community input, read this. This outlines exactly where the community input was, what the community asked for, and as someone pointed out, they asked for STEM. Now, the planning team did not know that because the planning team did not understand STEM. Now, I say this again from a factual basis because, unlike Franklin, and it's all documented, the planning team did not present the STEM subjects as they are presented in the PPS educational specifications. Had they done that, had they done their homework, had they presented STEM as it is in the PPS ed specs, and it's well done in there, things would have improved. Another thing, I'm glad Kevin spoke before me and pointed out that he's not an educator. That was one of the big problems. There was nobody involved with the Roosevelt STEM planning that had background in tech ed, unlike at Franklin. And those folks had an influence. So let's not continue with mistakes of not having the facts straight, not having educators involved. In response to the issue of the lack of students at Roosevelt, the reason we don't have more students at Roosevelt is because the resources have been lacking there and students choose to go elsewhere. To use the numbers there as a rationale for not doing this is irrational. We had community input. I show the votes here. Okay, it's right here, exactly what the community said they were interested in. So in terms of this facility that's being discussed, I think it's a very good idea. Don't go less than 5,000 square feet for STEM. The community was saying, between 5,500 and 6,000 would be, that's what we were shooting for. But we can work with 5,000. The idea of the CTE programs is very good. I think the programs that are being looked at will be very successful. I think doing all this, the kids are going to come back in droves. I mean, it is going to be a game changer, just like you said, and it's exactly what it'll be. And not just for the school, but for the whole community. I mean, when you talk to the community, people I talked to when I would hand out flyers and I show them the picture of the way it was done, oh, well, same old thing. People expect PPS to not do justice to the Roosevelt community. If you do this, you will be making a huge statement to them that the game has changed in more ways than one. And lastly, the idea of using this as a training facility is fabulous. One thing I have learned in working with PPS over this period of time is that there's a huge knowledge gap in terms of what STEM is. Huge. So to be able to have a facility, bring teachers in, teach them in an environment that is a STEM environment, not just doing professional development on an intellectual level, is going to affect the whole district. The whole district will benefit by having such a training facility for teachers, which I assume is going to be after school hours, so the students can use it during school hours. Anyhow, if you continue to leave Roosevelt behind, I mean, these mistakes were made. You can continue to dig a hole and not change it, but really, the district needs to recognize that these big mistakes were made, that it is totally justified to make corrections, that the input that was needed was not there during planning. It was resisted when the community advocates got on board. We did everything we could to get the planning team to bring in outside experts. Wouldn't be done. So as an educator, I see the issues from the standpoint of what do these students need? And these students need STEM. They need it for so many reasons, for careers, for staying in school, for exposure to a wide variety of careers. And I hope I covered everything. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. I would like to move this resolution forward to see if we can take it to our full board with the following amendments. So after item 2, after the first sentence, strike the second sentence. And then add a sentence there that the source of funding would be our existing and future premium from bond sales. And then add in item 3, the board will continue to work directly with industry partners for supplemental investment and programming expertise.
Very good. I completely support that.
Do we have a vote to move this forward? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Nope. Okay. We have, thank you, everybody. We have one more very quick item on our agenda. I don't know if this is Jerry or Ken, but just to give us a brief update, we had called for outside estimating on future work.
We did. And of course, it's very anticlimactic to this issue, but it was a carryover from the last agenda, so we'll cover it. We were directed to line up a funding source, a cost estimating firm to do scenarios for the 2016 bond. We wanted it different than our 2012, so we stay on the right side of things in terms of accounting. And so we sent a request for qualifications out. We got 4 firms sending back their proposals. And of course, some are individuals, some are small companies, some are large. So it's an hourly rate of the not to exceed. They go from $70 from the low to $220 on the high. These people will do, a lot of these firms are the same firms that our architects already have under contract for the Benson, Madison, and Lincoln master plans, as well as grants. So what we want to do is make sure we understand that contractual obligation that they already owe us through those architects for scenarios for the 2016 bond, not counting grant, before we employ these folks to have them do. We don't want any duplication there. So when we understand their contract obligations for funding scenarios and cost estimates proposals, then we'll know how we access one of these people here to do what-if scenarios that this committee would want. Our whole goal is still less than 60 days now, because this topic has kind of consumed us. We have maybe a 30-day window now. You'll probably want less. That we as staff have to come to committee to go to board on what that 2016 bond looks like in terms of the schools, in terms of the rough dollar amounts of square feet, and then you'll say, well, what if we did more, what if we did less, and that's what we want to use these folks for. And so we're going to have to move quickly, might even a couple meetings a month, like we originally did last fall, if that works, but we got to get back on track to get the board what they need to John to stay on track for the bond. So,
all right, good luck with that. Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Yeah. I mean, you mean just on that language of the amendment itself?
That's always a plus.
Yeah.
It's always a plus. Okay.
I'm going to go ahead my dog in my car. Oh, yes, okay. Okay, for supplemental investment. For supplemental investment and programming. Yeah, thank you.
okay, yeah, whatever works. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm late.
I'm sorry.
Good. My dog's in my car, so I have to.
Oh, yeah, no, this is.
Yeah, when I'm talk to him about that trainer anyway.
Oh, okay, okay.